What are your thoughts on that horrendous holding call on James Bradberry?
I mean, Kev, you said it for yourself. It was a horrendous holding call. Now, people are going to say, well, James Bradberry said after the game that it was a holding call, that he said that he tugged on Juju's jersey and that he was trying to get away with it. Honestly, I don't want to hear it. In that moment of the game, let them play. Because as far as I'm concerned, that is the pure definition of a ticky-tack foul call. And I imagine a lot of Philly fans are looking at that referee crew thinking that this game was fixed based on that holding call. And to a certain extent, I can sympathize with them. I'm not going to say that it was fixed, but to me, to have that type of call in that moment of the game that essentially decides the outcome of the Super Bowl, it's atrocious. Now, if it was a blatant holding call where you had no choice but to throw the flag, I would be fully understanding and I would be sympathetic towards the ref in that case. That is not the case here. This is a case, as far as I see it, you let that play roll out without any sort of holding call whatsoever. I know Mike Pereira was saying, well, that's technically a holding call based on the letter of the law. No, that is a game where that is a play where you just let that one be dictated by the outcome. It was an incomplete pass as far as I see it. And, looking at the actual time frame when the play took place, there's like a minute 50, minute 45 left in the game. It's a third down. It's a must-have play for both teams because if the Eagles stop them, you're talking about 4th and 8. You're talking about a 40-yard field goal. Harrison Butker had missed a similar type of field goal earlier in the game. He doinked it off the left upright. Now, I'm probably assuming, it's a safe assumption, that more than likely, let's say he hits it, hypothetically. Okay, so the Chiefs go up 38-35 with a minute 35, minute 40 left. In my mind, I'm thinking that Jalen Hurts and that Eagles offense has a very good chance to at least get into position for a game-time field goal, if not a go-ahead touchdown. Because as far as I see it, that Chiefs defense couldn't stop a parked car because the Eagles were just running up and down the field at will throughout most of the game. And I'd bet pretty heavily that the Eagles would be able to do something to get a drive started and then potentially score on that drive to potentially even send the game into overtime. That didn't happen. Refs throw the flag on James Bradberry, and then all the Chiefs have to do is just milk the clock for Harrison Butker to hit the game-winning field goal, which he did with about 10 seconds left. Also, just one quick point of mention. Jerick McKinnon was very smart to slide on the 1-yard line because we have seen plays in the past. I believe it was either Brandon Jacobs or Ahmad Bradshaw where he was trying to stop himself at the 1-yard line against the Patriots in Super Bowl 46. And his momentum carried himself into the end zone, which gave the Patriots the ball back with a little bit of time left. Now, granted, the Giants still won that game, but situational awareness, he unfortunately failed in that regard. Jerick McKinnon did not, and he slid correctly at the 1-yard line, which obviously set up the Harrison Butker field goal. When I look back at this referee crew, Carl Cheffers, the entire referee crew, I think that they let a bad play essentially dictate the outcome, or it's a bad call as far as I see it. That's a play where you let this one roll out, you live with the results, and, I think if I'm just looking at this from a casual fan perspective, I think that everybody can conclude with the same thing and thinking that was a horrendous holding call that ended the game essentially. And to me, when I look back at this game, obviously the Chiefs are worthy of being Super Bowl 57 champs. I don't want to miss that point entirely. I don't want that lost in translation. To me, this game will be forever marred by that holding call because that is a play where you just let it roll, live with the results, and you just roll with it. But to me, you don't make that call in that moment of the game with that type of ticky-tack call. So, I look at that referee crew. Obviously, they're going to be questioned about it probably to the nth degree as they should, but it was a bad call in my mind. Now, granted, I did pick the Eagles to win the Super Bowl, but I'm not even really counting that into factor here. I'm just looking at this as I was watching the game. You don't call that. You let it roll. And unfortunately, they didn't do that, and it directly influenced the outcome of the game as far as I see it. And that was despite the fact that both the Eagles defense and the Chiefs defense couldn't stop a runny nose the entire game. But in my mind, I think the Eagles could have done something to either tie the game or potentially win the game had they gotten an opportunity to. And unfortunately for them, they didn't do that. It's one of those things, you could leave it in the hands of the refs and you never know what you're going to get. Sometimes it works your way, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it didn't work out for the Eagles, but to me, this was a play that there should have been no flag thrown whatsoever. It should have been fourth down, not a first down for the Chiefs. And then who knows after that. But I in my mind, I think the Eagles got gypped there. And I'm a little bit sympathetic towards the Eagles fans displaying some displeasure towards the refs, if that's what they're taking away from this game.
I really don't have much to add to that. I mean, to me, as I said in the beginning, I kind of I don't want to be a hypocrite, right? We talked about it on the podcast that we guest starred on a few weeks ago, where Cincinnati and all that, you can't let a play or a championship or whatever come down to the wire of a referee's penalty. You can't let the refs dictate a game. But I will say specifically, that was a bad call. You got to let people play. You were calling a pretty good game all game long. You were letting people play, tug, push, hold, like everything, right? In that instance, I understand that it's a holding penalty, and Kyle had to remind me of the actual terminology of the rule. With pass interference, that ball is uncatchable. That's not going to be deemed pass interference. But because it was a holding call, that is then deemed irrelevant. Regardless of the actual distance of where the ball lands or where it sits, it's not going to make a difference to a holding call. Now, I understand what the officiating crew had seen and the replay. You see the hand kind of wrapped around the hip, but it didn't alter Juju's route. It didn't alter where Juju was going. It didn't slow Juju down. You know what I mean? Like it's like if he would have grabbed jersey, pulled back, and like you saw the stretching of the jersey, I'd have been like, okay, you can't say anything. It looked more like his hand was just there and he may have pulled, but again, that he wasn't getting that ball no matter what. It looked like Pat was throwing that ball away, and it just so happened, that's the penalty that was, that was what was called. But again, when you really look at this game from an Eagles standpoint, that defense was not able to do anything. They weren't able to stop any play, any momentum that Kansas City got. And again, it is what it is at that point. I'm not going to sit here and cry about. Excuse me, I just had like 6 hiccups back to back to back, and then a burp. Wow, that was horrible. I'm not going to sit here and let a call dictate how good of an offensive game the Eagles played. And I'm not an Eagles fan. Like Kyle said, it makes no difference to either of us. But you can definitely sympathize with Philly fans of how frustrated and angry they were with that potential missed opportunity. But Philly had their destiny in their hands, man. They were up 10 in that first half. Kansas City goes on to score 24 in the second half. Philly only scores 11. That speaks enough volume right there. Kansas City made adjustments. Looked like Philly wasn't able to make the right ones, and that's why Kansas City holds up that trophy. So, it is what it is on that front. I'm not really going to harp on a what if call should have been or shouldn't have been.